China unveiled details about its new draft law to fix national security loopholes in Hong Kong. But critics say the city's high degree of autonomy is at stake. What does the law mean for the one country, two systems principle? And U.S. President Donald Trump held his first rally in 3 months in Oklahoma on Saturday, but many seats were empty. What picture does it paint about the campaign trail ahead? Welcome to The Point, an opinion show coming to you live from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. A draft law on safeguarding national security in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region was reviewed by China's top legislature last week. The draft specifies that Beijing has fundamental responsibility, quote-unquote, and the Hong Kong SAR has, quote-unquote, constitutional responsibility for safeguarding national security. The SAR's Secretary for Justice has explained the law will only target an extremely small minority of criminals who endanger national security. But the idea of such a law has drawn much concern and criticism about possible erosion of the high degree of autonomy that Hong Kong has been enjoying. As leaders from China and Europe meet virtually in the summit Monday, how much will Hong Kong matter in the conversation? I'm joined from Beijing via Skype by Cui Hongjian, Director of the Department of European Studies at the China Institute of International Studies, and from Hong Kong by Lawrence Ma, who is Barrister and Chairman of the Hong Kong Legal Exchange Foundation. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. Mr. Ma, let me go to you first. Now, critics say the new law will jeopardize Hong Kong's high degree of autonomy from the rest of the country. Can granting the central government fundamental responsibility be interpreted as overriding Hong Kong's legal system, taking away Hong Kong's autonomy?
Well, under the two aspects, the administrative aspect of Hong Kong remains unchanged because the one country, two systems principle is still in place. Hong Kong people are running Hong Kong by ourselves. Our government is not run by officials coming from the mainland China. So we have our own system of government, and we have our own systems of civil servants who is now serving us. So the administrative system is not changed. Now, when you go to the legal system is still not changed because the common law system is still in place. The doctrine of precedence and as well as the common law system as distinguished from the civil law system, we are not using civil law codes. We are using common law precedents, and these precedents are gathered from Hong Kong and other common law jurisdictions. So as a result, there is no change in the administrative system and in the legal system in Hong Kong. Now, so if you look at national security, you understand that this is a concept of that the central government has ultimate responsibility. National security as per se means national security, not regional security. So as a result, the national government should have the ultimate responsibility to enact laws for Hong Kong's national security.
But under the draft law, there are articles which stipulates that there will be institutions that will be set up in Hong Kong to enforce the law on an individual cases. There will also be a commission of safeguarding national security in Hong Kong, which will be chaired by the chief executive of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. And there will be a certain case, as I said, that will be reviewed in Hong Kong. So you were talking about the judicial system that will not be changed, but it seems that according to the draft law, there will be certain changes, although the people that will be affected by these changes only belong to an extremely small minority, according to Secretary of Justice.
Well, you got to read the draft very carefully. The Hong Kong government, the Hong Kong police force has to set up a special branch to deal with this national security law. So there would be additional manpower in the police force to implement the law. So we don't need anyone from the mainland China sending police officers in Hong Kong to enforce the law. And of course, the court would have a special court. There will be special judges that are appointed who specialize in national security areas to handle and to make decisions in relation to criminal charges under the law. There is no judges being sent by the mainland China to Hong Kong to be a judge here, because there's a totally two different legal system. So in that regard, you can be sure that legal enforcement of is by and large still remains the same as being handled by the additional manpowers in Hong Kong, and there is no cross-border legal enforcement or enforcements that Hong Kong people concerned. There should not be and would not be any cross-border enforcement.
Well, looking at the draft, how can you persuade people that the central government in Beijing have actually taken into consideration the many different aspects of reality on the ground in Beijing while drafting this law, the many realities on the ground in Hong Kong while drafting this law in Beijing? Mr. Ma.
Well, of course, we have the National People's Congress delegates, as well as we have about 15 National People's Congress delegates. We have a number of Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference members in Hong Kong. We have about 200, and the provincial CPPCC members, including myself, have expressed numerous opinions in writing and orally via the liaison office and or directly to the central government, expressing our views, representing the views of Hong Kong people on our concerns, on Hong Kong people's concerns, to notify the central government.
Have these opinions been taken into consideration in drafting the bill, Mr. Ma?
Well, I think they have, because the bill was supposed to be released earlier, instead of later this month. We thought it would have been released by now, but because of our written opinions, they are seriously considering our opinion. Therefore, there is a delay in having the law by the end of this month. Without our opinion, I think the law would be here by now.
All right. Let me go to Mr. Cui for the possible impact this law might have on Sino-EU relations. As we speak, there is this virtual summit between Chinese and European leaders, which began earlier this afternoon via the internet. Mr. Cui, how prominently, how much will the national security discussion on Hong Kong impact the discussion between leaders from both sides this time?
Well, as we know that certainly there will be some impact from this debate or discussion about national security law in Hong Kong on the China-EU relations. As we know, even some European countries, they expressed some concerns about the legislation in Hong Kong. And also some countries like UK or some other. This time, I think Sweden played a very, very, remarkable role to have some remarks on this issue. And also, we can find out from official of the European Union, they also expressed some concerns about this issue, especially before this leaders' meeting between China and the EU. But I think that, yes, on one side, that maybe it's a very natural response from European Union side on this issue, because as we know, always worrying about that the willingness of Chinese government to uphold this one country, two system promise. But of course, on the other side, I don't think it's so big impact on China-EU relations, because
Why not?
Anyway, comparing with some other fields and corporations, I think that the Hong Kong issue is just a very little issue.
Okay.
And also at the same time,
well, last Friday, the European Parliament passed a resolution on Hong Kong, suggesting that the EU should bring China to the International Court of Justice if Beijing imposes a national security law on Hong Kong, alleging that it will violate the Sino-British Joint Declaration and the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. And also calling on the bloc to consider possible economic sanctions to dissuade China. This resolution was adopted with 565 votes for, 34 votes against, and 62 votes abstention. That's a pretty big difference between the in the opinion. So why shouldn't we take such voices seriously against the backdrop of bigger picture of China-EU ties, Mr. Cui?
I think this, you know, the issues of Hong Kong in European Parliament, I think as it's Euro, and always Parliament will try to have its voice on these relations as some problems with China and so on. But I don't think that it will give some concrete or substantial impact on China-EU relations, because as we know, this act from the European Parliament is a non-legally binding conclusion.
I see.
So I don't think there are some very concrete impact on China-EU relations.
But
of course,
yeah.
I think for Chinese side, China need to understand what's the real meaning from the European Union side on this issue. And if it's true that European Union also insisted that it will also follow this one country, two system. So I think regarding to this national security legislation in Hong Kong, now the key point of the debate is not if it's okay, if it's right for China to have the legislation. I think maybe the debate between China and the European Union is how could this legislation be implemented in Hong Kong.
Mr. Cui, why do China and the EU have such a different understanding of the national legislative matter here in Hong Kong?
I think this is a very big question for China and the EU on this debate is how could we narrow down the gap between the administrative level and also legal system, just like our Hong Kong friend mentioned that I think now this national security legislation from Chinese side try to find out the synergy or the linkage between the administrative and the legal system. So I think for most of the European people, maybe they are focused on just two, but I think certainly from Chinese perspective, always the focus of the one country, two system always is one country, because as we know, the one country should be the precondition for two systems.
All right. We have to leave it there. Many thanks to Lawrence Ma, Barrister and Chairman of the Hong Kong Legal Exchange Foundation, and Cui Hongjian, Director of the Department of European Studies at the China Institute of International Studies.